The second game on Thursday features 1 seed Florida and 4th seeded Maryland in the West region. This game being played in San Francisco. Maryland, I'm sure everyone's seen it at this point, won on what some people may consider a controversial play. A lot of people think it was a travel by Derek Queen, but a fascinating shot by a guy of his stature, 6'11", the athleticism to be able to take it from the top of the key going left and hit a runner at the buzzer to send your team to the Sweet 16. Super impressive. And then Florida, of course, squeaked it out against UConn yesterday afternoon. It was a bit ugly, to be honest. Like, UConn really controlled the tempo of that game, and I felt like Florida started pressing quite a bit as the game kind of got later. I think they kind of felt like it was slipping away a little bit, just because a lead in that game where UConn was really slowing the pace so much and getting good shots every possession, it seemed like. A 4-6 point deficit felt like 10 or 12. It felt like more of an uphill battle because they weren't able to get stops, and when they did score, it was another 30 seconds off the clock. But this game I expect to look quite a bit different because both teams want to play with pace. Both teams want to shoot the three. At least Florida does, and in Maryland, they have their 2 bigs, but they also have 3 guards that are all capable of shooting a three. Granted, they haven't shot it superbly in the first 2 rounds, but I expect this to be another super fun game.
Yeah, this game it's definitely going to look a lot different than that Florida UConn game, and I'm kind of willing to give Florida a free pass just because as I was watching that game, I was like, this UConn offense is really tough to prepare for, especially when you only get 1 day to prepare. Like guarding all those secondary actions, all the off-ball screening actions, it's just you can't cover it all in 1 day. So I'm willing to give Florida a pass. Although the perimeter defense, like especially Clayton, like it was a little bit shaky overall. And yeah, it definitely wasn't their best game, but the fact that they were able to overcome that and beat the 2-time defending national champ, although it's not the same caliber of team, I think it was still pretty impressive. But yeah, this game is going to be really fun. Both of these teams like to run. They both profile pretty similarly. The guard play is super fun. They're looking to get up and down. They're looking to, not fire away at every opportunity, but most of the guards on both sides have the green light. So it could turn into a bit of a shot making battle. Maryland's pressure I could potentially see bothering Florida a little bit. Like I know Florida takes care of the ball pretty well. They're 43rd in the country in turnover rate, but they've shown some cracks against teams that like to pressure. So it's kind of just something to monitor there. And Florida in the battle of the front court is also pretty interesting. It's just I kind of worry that either Queen or Reese is going to get into foul trouble, and that's where the depth of this team, the lack of the depth, starts to kind of rear its head in this game. Just because Florida, they have 4 or 5 bigs that they can throw on the floor, and for Maryland, their 3rd big is what, Geronimo or Gapari? It's not great replacement value there because Queen and Reese do so much, but I do think Florida kind of matches up pretty well in the front court. So I don't really have a great feel for this game schematically, but I do think at some point Maryland's going to run into some foul trouble, regardless of, they don't foul all that much. They only foul. They're 25th in the country in free throw rate defense, so it's not something that looks like an issue. But I just think Florida puts so much pressure in the front court that one of those 2 guys is going to get some early foul trouble, potentially some in the second half as well. And we're not going to really see the full strength version of the Terps for all 40 minutes of this game. And I think that's what ultimately gives Florida the edge.
Yeah, I agree. I think that depth piece for Florida in the front court is extremely crucial. And as we've talked about a bunch, especially with, I think Queen does a pretty good job of staying out of foul trouble for the most part, but it's more Reese, I think, that oftentimes runs into that foul trouble. He can just be a bit undisciplined at times. Uh, my concern a little bit for Florida comes on the defensive end, um, more so with the guards, and in particular, right? For anyone that watched that game against UConn, and I assume Kevin Willard has watched it now 3 or 4 times. Um, Hurley went at Walter Clayton over and over and over. In primary actions, secondary actions, they made a point to attack him on back cuts. They made it a point to attack him in off ball screens. And, I think he's shown flashes of being capable, but sometimes it just seems like he falls asleep off the ball. And that's where my main concern is with the Gators is, if they're making crucial mistakes on the defensive end, a few times even, I know UConn's tough to prepare for, but they had like miscommunications in like whether they were supposed to be, it looked like whether they were supposed to be switching or not on like pin down screens, flare screens, off the ball, and someone got an open shot. That happened more in the first half the other day against UConn. But there was a lot of like point switching going on from what it looked like. And so I guess that's my main concern. This is a guard group for Maryland that if you're doing that against them, they're going to make you pay because they're all 37% or better 3-point shooters. So that's my main concern. But I do think, there's some validity to your point about one of those guys getting in foul trouble. Whereas for Florida, they can afford it a little bit more because they have the depth in the front court. They have a 5-guard rotation really at this point, that I think just allows them to be able to live with a little bit more foul trouble, or anything that could potentially happen, because I think they trust most of those guys. They were playing ISO ball with Denzel Aberdeen for a couple possessions in the second half yesterday, which seemed crazy. I mean, he did hit a step back too that probably was an and one, but they didn't call it. But I'm going to go with Florida here. I think ultimately they're just going to wear Maryland down enough. That Maryland depth, I think, or lack thereof, as you said, is going to end up being a problem. So I'm going to take the Gators to win. Not really sure how I feel about the number, but I think they win somewhere in that like 5-10 range.
Yeah, Maryland's offense could generate some stuff in secondary actions. That was the issue last game against UConn. Maybe Golden makes an emphasis to cut off those kind of actions. But the only way you can really do that is kind of switching those actions. And Florida, when you play two bigs, you can't really switch any sort of secondary action. It can create some bad mismatches in ISO situations. Like one matchup that kind of happened earlier in the season was against North Carolina, and North Carolina's guards were just able to get downhill against Florida's bigs. I think the same type of thing would happen if you were to switch everything, and like Gillespie, Rice, and Miguel could kind of get downhill or break down the front court of Florida and make some like step back threes or step back jumpers. So I don't think that'll be the way to approach it. But Rodney Rice is great when it coming off screens, so he's going to be someone to monitor. I would assume. I think Elijah Martin would he get the Rice assignment, or would he get Gillespie?
I don't know.
Or maybe Will Richard gets Rice. I don't know.
I feel like Will Richard probably gets Rice,
and then Martin, you throw him at Gillespie, and like he's able to get over the top of ball screens a little bit easier, kind of cut that off. So I think they can do enough to get it done. And like I said, I think it's just the foul trouble concerns that will ultimately help Florida pull away in this game. Like I could see Maryland winning at halftime because once these jump shooters in Maryland get going, like they're really hard to stop no matter what defense is out there. So I could see them going on a run and being up at halftime, but I do think it's the depth that ultimately is going to hurt them.
Yeah, no, I agree. But should be another fun game. But we're going to take Florida here to move on to the Elite Eight.